Hi guys, in this lesson I'm gonna go over 3 different ways that you can view the alto scale that should help you get more familiar with it and should help you make some strong lines with it. If you're already familiar with the alto scale, then possibly these 3 different perspectives could give you some new ideas for lines. So I already made one lesson on using the alto scale where I went over how to resolve all the notes in the scale to a tonic and sort of in detail went over how to approach playing with it. I think a problem that a lot of people have when they're trying to learn this in the beginning is that they have to start thinking in terms of flat 9s and flat 5s and sharp 5s and all those kind of altered extensions. And that's a bit difficult because we're not so used to hearing them and we're not so used to thinking in them. So it can be really useful to find another way to approach it. Another thing that's a little bit of a problem is that when you have an alto scale, the diatonic chord that you have on the root of the dominant that you're playing it over is not a dominant chord at all. It's a half diminished chord. So actually the scale we're using doesn't have a diatonic chord that's in this case a G7 in A flat melodic minor. So there are sort of some of the ways that we normally would approach making lines, taking the chord and filling up gaps with scale and stuff like that. It's a little bit more tricky and doesn't work just as easily as what we're used to. And that makes it difficult to figure out how to make lines on it. So in this lesson I'm just going to go over how you can think about the scale in a few different ways so that you can start making lines and start making sense of it. All the examples that I'm going to go over are in the key of C. So this cadence, so it's 2-5-1 in C, D minor 7, G7 altered to C major, and G7 altered, as I mentioned, is the same as A flat melodic minor. So that would be this scale. So since we have this G half diminished arpeggio on the G and no G7, we need to sort of find a way around that without having to think too much and having to analyze everything we play. One way to do that is to think of another chord that's still in the A flat melodic minor scale, but just to have another chord so that we can start making lines on that one and then try and resolve that to C and see if that doesn't work instead of having our G7 altered, which is then a bit mysterious. The first one I think you should start with is to take a chord that works with pretty much the same function. So this is a chord that you can actually substitute the G7 altered with, because you could use D flat 7 sharp 11. The D flat 7 sharp 11 is a tritone substitution of G7, and it's also Lydian dominant. So that means that you would be using the A flat melodic minor on it, and this is a chord that we can easily just sort of put in the cadence, and it's still gonna sound like a real cadence. So that would be something like this. And if I made a line, just a very simple line using this, then that would be something like this. And because it's a D flat 7 without, I mean we have the sharp 11 in there of course, but for the rest it's just a normal D flat 7 with a 9 and all this stuff. And I expect that if you're working on alto dominants, you're probably familiar with making lines on a dominant like that. So that makes it a lot easier to just come up with something, and then you just have to figure out like how can I resolve this to the C instead of resolving it to a G flat like we're used to. So that would be the trick. That would be the first one I would go to, and it's also I'm pretty sure it's how I learned to play alto scale too. That the trick was in the beginning when you couldn't find any really good lines and you didn't know what arpeggios to use. Once you start thinking of it as a D flat 7, it gets a lot easier. And then later you can always transition into thinking in terms of just G7. The next example that I would suggest you check out is to think of the dominant as being an A flat minor major chord. So really sort of the A flat minor melodic sound, because that's the scale you're using, and there's at least some possibility, and it's quite likely that you already know how to play some sort of tonic minor in that key, and then you can use that. Again, you need to check out how to resolve it to a C, but that's not that difficult to figure out, and you probably can use stuff that you already have in your fingers and in your ears. So if I put that in the cadence, that would be something like this. And a very basic line using this concept would be so that way you can still use some very simple melodies and try and see if you can fit them and get them to resolve to C. So even if you play, you can really get, this is still pretty much the sound of an, I mean, you can hear that as being this, but you can also still hear it as being an alto dominant. So for that, it's a pretty okay way to approach it. In the long run, again, you're better off converting the way you think about the melodies as back to thinking them as dominant lines, in my opinion. The last example is to really just figure out, okay, what kind of G7 can I actually make in this scale, and then use that. So that means that we'll use the original cadence, so that would be something like. And there are two options from having a G7 arpeggio in this scale. We can't have a normal G7 because we don't have a fifth, so we can choose if we want to have a flat 5 or a sharp 5. And they're both possible in the scale, and you can use them. I'm not sure. I think one is better than the other. In this case, I took the flat 5. And the line I made would be this. So I'm using this flat 5 arpeggio. The advantage with this approach is of course that you then, if you use arpeggios like this or like this, then you're relating everything to a G7, so you're really playing the chords that's there, which is, I think, what you want to do in the long run. But you kind of need to check out a lot of stuff that you might not already be familiar with. I'm not sure if everybody knows their dominant flat 5 or sharp 5 arpeggios. So that can be sort of a problem with that approach, and maybe this is almost a definition of where you want to go with it. So all the other lines that you make using the D flat 7 or the A flat melodic minor sort of pattern on it, is something you want to convert into thinking it in G7. The reason why I think you want to, in the end, think of this as a G7 altered and not as an A flat melodic minor or a D flat 7 is that it's a good way to start it, to just get some ideas, but it's also it's probably better to really think the chord that's there, because you're playing in a song and there's a cadence, and the composer thought of this chord and he put it there for a reason, so you might want to think of it like that too. And it's also going to make it easier to change it to something else, because it's going to be a bit harder to suddenly realize that what you normally think of as an A flat 7 minor major, the piano player chose to play as a G7 sus4, because they don't sound alike at all. So if you have it related to the G still, then you're sort of staying in the neighborhood in terms of thinking, which I find more useful. But of course, I'm not sure if that's just me. But I do have the impression that most people really learn how to think in altered scale along the way. And also that most people really have problems with in the beginning, because it's difficult to think in flat 13 and flat 5 and stuff like that. So that was some examples, and as you can tell, probably this lesson is not so much about the examples because they're quite simple and straightforward. This is probably much more about ways of thinking about the author scale, and how sort of thinking it in terms of other chords might help you learning how to use it, or might give you some new ideas for making lines on it. If you like this lesson, then please like it here on YouTube, and you can of course also subscribe to my YouTube channel. I make a new lesson every week, so there's lots of stuff coming. If you want to download a PDF of the examples, then you can go to my website. The article that is accompanying this lesson has a PDF download. On my website you can also subscribe to my newsletter if you want to stay up to date with lessons and other things happening. Like I'm probably going to be going on tour in about a month in Spain with some concerts and some master classes. And there's also going to be a CD coming out soon that I recorded last time I was in Spain. If you want to support my lessons, there's another thing you can do. You can check out the lessons that I have for sale on my website in the Webstore. I made some lessons that are sort of taking some of the topics that I made YouTube lessons on, and then I'm applying it to songs, and really trying to show how I play with it, and how I use it when I'm playing a real song, or a blues, or a rhythm change, or stuff like that. There are a few different ones on comping and also on soloing, on different kind of common forms and progressions. So you can check that out. If you have any comments or questions or ideas for topics, then please let me know. You can leave a comment on the video, and you can of course also get in touch with me on Twitter or Instagram or Google Plus or Facebook. Let me know there. I'm always happy to hear from you guys, what you guys want to hear lessons on, and if there's something that I should explain more, or that I can work more in other videos, then that's nice to know. I want to make as good lessons as I can, and the feedback that I get from you guys is really useful for that. So I hope to hear from you. So that's about it for this week. Until next week, thank you for watching.